Welcome back to Global Education Zone, and my name is Anthony Nathaniel. And today we'll be dealing with reproduction in plants, a very important topic in biology. And then let's move on. So now, reproduction. What's reproduction? Reproduction is simply the ability of living organisms to give birth or give rise to young ones of their own kind, right? Now, not only animals but plants also reproduce, and plants reproduce in specialized structures known as flowers. Now, this is the general structure of a flower. I'm doing a general structure of a flower. I think we have something like this, and we have something like this. And we have something like this. Now this is a typical flower. This is a typical flower, and now I will explain the different parts of this flower. I will explain the different parts of these flowers. Let me see. Here we go. And then we have the ovary too. Now these parts that look like knobs, they are called the anthers. And this part that hold the anthers are called the filaments. And these stalks that extend out, they are called the style. We have the style, the stigma. These are the stigma. Then the length is called the style. Then we have the petals. Then we have the sepals. We have the pedicel. We have the epicalix. Then we have the receptacle. Now I'll explain all this part of the flower in a moment. Now, basically, this flower is a typical flower, and this flower has both the male and the female reproductive part. And now this flower is divided into different parts, but we'll talk about four major parts. The first major part is called the petals, and the petals of the flower is also known as the corolla. The petals is also known as the corolla. So there are four major parts of the flower. You have the corolla. Then we also have the calyx. Then we have the androecium. Then we have the gynoecium. So basically, the corolla consists of the petals, and those petals, you know that flowers are colorful, right? Flowers are red, orange, green, yellow, blue, and whatever. So they consist of different colors, and those colorful parts of flowers, they are known as the petals. So that's also known as the corolla, and petals function to attract insects to pollinate the flower. And pollination, which we'll be talking about in another video, but today we're talking about an introduction into the structures for plants. That is the plant physiology, or rather the anatomy of plant flowers. So now the pollination is basically the process by which pollen grain transfer from one plant to another, and they go down the style tube, and they go to fertilize the ovules of the plant, and those ovules are the seeds. They are the immature seeds of the plant. So basically, the reason why a plant has a petals or corolla is because of pollination, and pollination allows the plant to reproduce and grow and generate its other plants. So now next we'll talk about the calyx. The calyx is also known as the sepal, and this is the sepal. The sepal is just like a green part of the flower, and it is below the petals. It's often below the petals, and it also supports the petals. So the calyx is also known as the sepal. And then we might also have what they call the epicalix, and this epicalix is below the calyx or the sepals, and this epicalix functions to also support the sepals. So that is the corolla. The corolla is also known as petals, and the calyx is also made up of the sepals. Now we'll talk about the androecium. The androecium is made up of the anther and filament. Now the anther is a kind of tube. It's a kind of container that contains the pollen grains, and when the pollen grains are mature, the anther are going to extend as high above the flower as possible, so as to be able to, when they explode, the pollen grains are disintegrated, they are dispersed, and when they are dispersed, they flow around the air. That is for wind pollinated flowers, or they can be sticky so that insects can be able to carry them from one flower to another, so that they can pollinate the flowers. Now that is the aneurysm. The aneurysm consists of the anther, and the anther consists of the pollen grains. And now the anther is held by the filament. That filament is holding the anther, and it is also producing some of the materials that are used to synthesize the pollen grains. Now next, talk about the gynoecium. The gynoecium is the female part of the flower, and because the female part of the flower is so important, and because it produces the fruits which we eat and which nourishes our body, so we'll talk about that in a separate section of this video. Now, gynoecium. The gynoecium consists mainly of the what we call the style, the stigma. We have the ovary and the oval. Now, that style, stigma, ovary, and oval, they all form a part called the calyx. So now the calyx looks something like this. So inside the calyx, you have your ovule. So your ovules are just like your seeds. They are the immature seeds of the plant. And now, before that, let me talk about the structure of an anther. So an anther looks something like this. This is our anther. This is the male aneurysm part of the plant, and this is the supporting structure or supporting tissue. Then we have the anther, and then what is holding the anther is the filaments. Now basically, when the pollen grains are ripe and mature, the anther bursts open and the pollens go out. But then let's focus on the female part of the flower. The female part of the flower is made up specifically of units known as calyx, and they are known as carpels. So now these carpels, if it's single carpels of a flower, it's called a monocarpous flower, and if there are more than two carpels, if there are two or more carpels, they can be called a polycarpous flower, or if they are fused together into one, it's called a syncarpous flower. Now those carpels, inside the carpels we have the ovules, and inside the ovules, and the ovary is the part of the flower that contains the ovules. And now note, the ovary of the flower develops to form the fruit, while the ovule of the flower develops to form the seed. So you can write that at the back of the note somewhere so as to have it as a tip. So the ovary forms the fruit and the ovule forms the seed. Now moving on, this part of the flower extends outward into the style, and the style also extends into the stigma. So when the pollen grains from a plant move on to the deposition on the stigma, a particular pollen tube is formed. When the pollen grains rest on the stigma, it is absorbed into the stigma, and because of the digestive enzymes of the pollen grains, it forms a pollen tube that extends downwards into the pollen, into the stigma, into the style, and then that pollen tube extends down into the ovary of the flower, and when it gets into the ovary of the flower, it kind of fuses with the ovule. Now another little detail into the pollen tube: the pollen grains of a flower consists mainly of the coat, and the coat is divided into the exine and the intine. And then we have the generative nucleus. Then we have the tube nucleus. So basically, this video is not going to be comprehensive detail into the structure of plants and their productive parts, but I will run over the parts of the flower now, and I will talk about their functions. Now when you have something called the pedicel of the flower, the pedicel of the flower is part of the flower that attaches the flower to the stem. So the pedicel attaches the flower to the stem. The next we have the receptacle. Now this is the pedicel of the flower. The pedicel of the flower, it is the stalk of the flower. It's also known as flower stalk. It attaches the flower to the stem of the plant. Now next we have the receptacle. It carries and holds together the other parts of the flower. Now above the pedicel we have the receptacle. Just above the pedicel we have the receptacle, and the receptacle is like the is like the bone and the structure, the skeleton of the flower. It holds the flower upright in a position for pollination. Next we talk about the sepal. The sepal is also known as the calyx, and the calyx encloses and protects the other floral parts when the flower is in bud stage. So when the flower is in bud stage, it's known as when the flower is not yet mature. And you know that flowers, they are often closed when they are in bud stage. An example of this is okra. When you have your okra plant, okra has some kind of purplish flowers, and those flowers, they are always closed when they are in bud stage. But when they are mature, they open and they expose the reproductive parts of the flower. Next, we'll talk about the petals. The petals are the colorful parts of the flowers, and they are also the largest parts. So these are the petals. This is the petals. These large parts are the petals. So now those petals help to attract insects to the flower. Next, we'll talk about the filament. The filament holds or carries the anther. The filament is the part of the flower that holds the anther, and the anther is part of the flower that contains the pollen grains. Now, The anther contains the pollen grains, and the pollen grains produce the mature gametes that fertilize the ovules. And those ovules, I cannot stress it enough, the ovules are the seeds of the plant, and the ovules form the seed. Now we talk about the stigma. The stigma receive the pollen grains at pollination. So I talk about this diagram where we have the stigma, and the stigma is also absorbs the pollen grain, and at the stigma you have the pollen tube formed, and the pollen tube is formed through the style. Now the style is the connection between the stigma and the ovary, and it is the passage of the pollen tube to reach the ovules or the ovary. Next, talk about the ovary. The ovary contains the ovaries which and develops the fruit. Now this is the ovary of the flower, and this ovary, when it matures after pollination, it forms the fruits, and that is the edible part of the fruits we eat. Now the ovules produce the female gametes producing the seeds. Now the ovules are the female gametes that produce the seeds of the plant. So basically, we've been able to cover the major part of flower, and thank you for watching.